We continue our series on transformation, power to change. Transformation, power to change. And we need power to change from what we think we are into what God would have us be. And we certainly didn't have a choice about how we were born, but we can choose how we want to die. And we certainly want to die in the Lord, and that's one of the key things about religion or our belief as Christians, is that because of Jesus Christ, we can die in the Lord. From the book of Romans, the 12th chapter and the 2nd verse, the scripture says, "And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed," King James Version, "by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." We began last time by focusing on the good and acceptable and perfect will of God as the answer to the question of change. So there are steps toward renewing our mind, and when we renew our mind, we can change. But first, we have to go through non-conformity. That means not being conformed to this world. What does that mean? That means that non-conformity, conform, T-Y, equals coming out of the world. That's what it means. And it doesn't mean physically coming out of the world, because eventually we will do that. It means mentally focusing in our mind on things spiritual in nature. That's what nonconformity means. The first step is to become a nonconformist. That means someone who does not necessarily focus on the things of this world. And then it says, renew your mind by being transformed. So transformity is our second thing. First is nonconformity, then second, transformity. And transform means change. And that's what our topic of transformation has to do with change. So we say transform. We'll get another color here. Transform. Transformity equals change. That means we have to change from what we have become through the collective mind. That means the accumulation of all the thoughts, ideas, and information that's been imparted to us by others into what God would have us be. And that's where we bring to our third step, which is mental renewal or mind renewal. We have here a Y and X axis, and you can see the movement from nonconformity here and to transformity here to mental renewal, which starts off very low. But increasingly, as we are transformed, it moves up. As you can see, 88. It starts off with 100, then it moves to 75%, then it moved to mental renewal, moved to a very small amount of our existence. But as time goes on, it sort of reverses, and that's where the power of God comes in. That's where the power of the Spirit comes in, that transformity. And then here we have mental renewal. Mental renewal. Mental renewal. So mental renewal results from emptying our minds. How do we do that? How do we empty our minds? Emptying our minds is just another word for meditation. meditation. So, nonconformity, coming out of the world. Transformity, change. Mental renewal, emptying our mind through meditation. And so you can see with our graph here on the y-axis, you can see that as we move toward mental renewal, the various steps increase and decrease accordingly. We begin in the world, and this is the collective mind. You've heard me talk about it. Collective mind. And it's just what it says. The collective mind collects all the information that's in the world from no matter the source. Education is part of the collective mind. Reading the newspaper, reading books, listening to relatives, family and friends, teachers. All this is the collective mind. Not bad in and of itself, and it's certainly good for the negotiation of the body and keeping the temple, which is the body, alive. But we have to move from that by transformation. This is where the individual comes in. You have to make a decision to be born again. And that decision to be born again, you see starting to increase, starting to come up, so to speak, is mental renewal. So as we empty out of the collective mind, mental renewal starts to take place and starts to rise. And so as a result, when we start moving on the horizontal axis. As we start moving on the horizontal axis, x-axis, we start moving up. As we start moving up on the vertical axis, which is y-axis. And then you can see here clearly, as we are transformed, the mental renewal begins to rise, and conformity, our conformity begins to decrease. We start coming out of the individual mind, and as a result, we start arriving in renewal. What does all this mean? It simply means that we have to not conform to this world, but be transformed by renewing our mind, that we may prove what is good, acceptable, and perfect. The good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. Why is that all necessary? It's necessary because we are born with, we're born in transgression. We're born with an ego, an arrogance, and a self-centeredness, and a selfishness. And as a result, that has to be emptied out so God can fill us up. As you see here, the mental renewal starts taking place. God begins to provide. God provides. And as God begins to provide, we begin to change. And as we begin to change, we begin to renew our minds. And the renewal of our minds opens up the opportunity for the development of the soul. Again, I've drawn this stick man or woman a lot. Go back to it. The mind is here. The body is here. And the spirit or heart is here. And the mind will dominate the body and will block out the sunlight of the spirit. And we will live completely in the world. But the whole idea is to open up, or get to a certain extent, the whole idea is to open up the mind and renew that mind. Renew the mind, or in what I call over here, emptying it. Emptying the mind. The body is fading fast, and all that's left is the spirit, and that's what needs to be renewed in order for us to determine the good, the acceptable, and perfect will of God. Steps toward renewing our mind is a way of saying steps toward determining what God's will is for our life, so we can begin to live the happy and productive life that God intended for us to live. More in our next video.